Last exit on the left. I'm here with Terrence of Decent Federal Project. And although you're part of the podcast in a larger sense because you support decentralization and such, it's not why we have you on this week. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background in AI and automation?
Sure. So in sort of, I guess, my previous life, I worked in conversational artificial intelligence for two startups, helped create a company that built summarization solutions for news and social content via conversational AI, and built that into an app. And in my second startup, we did conversational artificial intelligence for customer service using machine learning. So yeah, I've delved deep into the conversational AI beast, if you will, and remain a big fan of the space despite not being in it currently.
No, AI is, I think we can both agree, AI is a very important part of the future. It's going to have a lot of positive impact, but it's obviously going to have a lot of negative. You're talking about customer service. That's a $14 an hour job right now on average to start out. And it's, I believe besides serving, it's like the number one like good job for like single moms. How long is it going to be until that job is completely taken over by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And by the way, I should just preface my answer by saying my first job out of college was in customer service, servicing Apple iPhones and iPads. So I've been on kind of both sides of this equation. The answer is a little bit unclear, but I can speak to, kind of the degree to which I've seen it going in a direction that suggests that those jobs definitely will disappear in the next couple of decades, probably at the outside, and then possibly much sooner. So my second startup, we took a sort of augmentative approach to artificial intelligence in customer service, where we actually worked with customer service, departments, and the way our technology worked was, or still works because the company is still around. Basically, we'd offer AI-powered suggestions on responses to customer service questions that the agent could kind of take or leave, or sort of edit and that sort of thing. And it was more in kind of the text space, like so email, text message, that sort of thing. And the reason we took this approach is because it's a little bit easier to build, right? So offering solutions that the customer, the agent can kind of take or leave, kind of gives you the opportunity to both, support the agent, but also give the agent the opportunity to basically train your system and make your system better. But obviously what that means, theoretically, at least in the long term, is you're working that agent out of a job, at least ostensibly or conceivably. And so I guess what I'd say, kind of to directly answer your question, is, yeah, these jobs are likely to start going away. There are sort of several obstacles to them going away, but none of them are insurmountable, I'd say. And we can go into that at length if you'd like.
I was going to say the day that the AI system is on par with a human being when it comes to customer service, seems to me like that's going to be the day all the jobs go away, because it will just be cheaper to, and let's be honest, machines don't call in sick usually. Machines do not have problems at home.
Right.
That scares me. The other, I was going to, so customer service, they say, is another job. Another one, I think this is also interesting too, because there's a lot of, I in theory support an increase in the minimum wage, but I also believe in prioritizing things and using your political capital in certain ways. What do you say to the argument that a lot of these minimum wage jobs are at higher risk of being automated away?
What do I say to the argument in terms of, I mean, obviously, as far as like the space is concerned, those jobs are going away. In terms of what I say to the argument, do you mean like, do I think those jobs should be automated away, or?
I'm saying like everyone is fighting for $15 for a McDonald's employee. And I, in theory, would have loved that idea in 1990 or 2000 even. But what I'm thinking is, are those jobs, I almost think it's moot having the $15 minimum wage, because what I've been told, and you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the jobs that are going to be automated away first are going to be those repetitive minimum wage jobs, flipping burgers, putting fries in the fryolator. Can you speak to that, or am I completely wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We talked about customer service, obviously, but yeah, I think these kind of repetitive, quote unquote, unskilled labor jobs are going to be certainly the first to go. And one of the sort of interesting avenues we could go down in conversation is the degree to which COVID might be accelerating that process, because as people have been laid off while stock prices have continued to soar to the heights of to new records. There's a strong argument to be made that because of risks to employees from the pandemic, the sort of workers' comp, or like the argument for automating those jobs away, as far as those stakeholders, those stockholders are concerned, might be actually growing and contributing to those jobs being automated away more quickly.
The other one, and it doesn't seem as obvious, is Amazon and how it is taking away the brick and mortar jobs, like malls. They say a third of the malls in America are going to be closed. And now, especially since you add COVID to the mix, these malls have not been open for a while. How will AI and automation, you think, affect the brick and mortar businesses in America?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're right to point out that those brick and mortar places are going away already. I think, it's another circumstance in which AI accelerates a change that's already taking place. There's a certain degree to which I think small businesses that can't afford to automate their workers away, in certain terms of the sort of startup costs, that those might be avenues where automation isn't taking over those jobs so quickly, or might not overtake those jobs in general. As someone who works in the restaurant service industry myself, there's a certain degree to which people enjoy that approach of speaking to a human and having that back and forth, and that suggests that human connection matters, perhaps more than sort of market forces might suggest, and makes it more likely that at least the smaller businesses, and again, of course, in the environment of COVID, when I think the number is between 40 and 50% of small businesses are expected to close. It suggests this kind of move in the direction of the bigger businesses controlling that much more of the economy, and obviously because they can afford to automate jobs away, they might be more likely to. But for those small businesses that survive, you might see kind of a backlash, I guess, for lack of a better term, to the automation revolution, or however you want to phrase it.
You brought up an interesting point I want to hit on. If I'm not mistaken, you're originally from Colorado?
Yes.
I take it you've probably been to Boulder before?
I have, yeah. I grew up in Boulder, first half of my childhood.
I love Boulder. And to me, Boulder is an example of a town that will thrive in the future. Their downtown, all sorts of interesting restaurants, consignment shops, boutique what have yous, like lots of whiskey places, beer places. That to me, and you're talking about small businesses, those are the kind of towns that are going to survive, that have something interesting, that have a scene that people want to go and visit. There's a great, and for everyone listening, I always plug Joel Garreau. I'll give him 2 plugs today. First is the one that I learned about automation, his book, Radical Evolution, where he talks about the GRIN technologies, genetics, robotics, information, and nanotechnology. The other, if you look up Joel Garreau on YouTube, he does a TED Talk where he talks about the Santa Fe of America, where he talks about it's small towns with hiking that have boutique shops, that have a college town vibe, that are going to survive in the future. Because another thing with COVID, and we can talk about this, like my wife works for a major tech company. She's working from home now. She's going to be working from home till August. A lot of these big tech companies, what's going to be appealing to a lot of people is being able to work from home now. 5G is coming, so you're going to have you're going to have great internet wherever you go. How will working from home, you think, change the economy or society that we live in right now?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see, when vaccines reach kind of a critical mass and people start feeling comfortable again, to what extent, people go back to the cities a little bit. But I absolutely agree. And I think we talked before about, Joel Garreau and, this sort of Santa Fe-ization of America, I think is real. And I think what it comes down to is there'll sort of be a bifurcation of types of cities, where you'll have these kind of automation focused, bigger cities, like New York, because that's kind of the direction that cities like that are going already, be kind of the forefront of the automation of everything, basically. Whereas these cities like Boulder, like Santa Fe, like Gloucester, where I live now in
Gloucester's
Massachusetts.
a great example.
These places, there is a draw there, and so I think it'll be interesting to see to what extent you see kind of a bifurcation of different types of urbanization, if you will, in the direction of more automation versus the direction of more, human kind of place-based, like, connection to the land and to, in the case of Gloucester, to the water. I think you can expect, or I would guess, that we'll see kind of a bifurcation between those 2 types of cities, and we'll see perhaps one will win over the other. I'm not sure, but I expect to see both kind of thrive in different directions, if I were to make a guess.
If I were a small town right now, I would be really investing in my school systems. So that when these upper class families that have been living in the city can now work from home, oh my gosh, I can now buy a house with 2 acres and there's a good school system. It could be a real good opportunity for a lot of rural communities and suburban communities to get some of that city money and some of those, that tax base, as it were. So I used to teach chess. And an interesting thing that happened in the world of chess is AlphaZero. It was an AI program that taught itself chess after 4 hours. And now it's better than any chess supercomputer. It's the level of above average tournament chess player I am to like Magnus Carlsen, the world chess champion. That gap is much closer than the AI versus a supercomputer. They have a thing called the God rating, meaning that the AI is playing above what a human brain is capable of. I was wondering if you could give some examples of some AI jobs that are going to replace people that you wouldn't typically expect.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think basically what we're seeing, and this goes to these AI that are learning games, that are learning, logic-based games, as opposed to the sort of, like we alluded to earlier, the more sort of menial tasks. I think the fact is we're going to see the automation of any number of things that we haven't thought of yet as AI grows smarter. And I can get into the kind of types of algorithms that go into building AI and that sort of thing if you want. But suffice it to say that when I talk about the kind of technological limitations that we're running into that seem to sort of be plateauing, the job loss for the time being, it's basically around like processing power. The server farms in any remote corner of the U.S. Are kind of reaching an issue with like powering those stations and having enough computing power to do the kind of AI tasks that allow for the automation of those things that we might not expect. So while I'm not really pointing to any particular kinds of jobs that I think we haven't thought of that might get automated away, what I would say is once those barriers are removed, once we find ways to build more power efficient server farms and things like that, and overcome some of these other technological limitations to the growth of AI, that's when it's going to explode. And, we talk about in kind of the AI space and in the kind of sci-fi space as well, the kind of technological singularity where we reach a point where, growth becomes exponential and you can't anticipate, exactly what AI will be able to do. And I think once we hit that point, then all bets are off and anything is automatable away, frankly.
I'm going to suggest a guest for your podcast. The guy, I'll get you in touch. His name, Jason Mallory. He ran for Congress. I believe he was an engineer. He had three issues: universal basic income. Another one that was super interesting. He wanted to build a barrier from San Diego to Texas, to Brownsville. And so instead of a wall, he wanted to have a freight hyperloop that would go back and forth and replace the Panama Canal. He's like, all right, if people want to build a wall, like I'm going to build it and make money for America. But the third idea he had, which is more relevant to this conversation, is that he wanted to be able to anonymously put people's medical information and their medical history into a database for AI to crunch and look at so that they could find ways to prevent, certain diseases and things like that in the future. Like if they have all this information, they can deduce and find ways to detect cancer earlier or things like that. And to me, that's an amazing thing. That's something that, we look at AI, that could reduce costs for medical in the future. Medical is all about preventative care, really, to save money. Are there any other things that you could think of where AI could really fundamentally change society in a much better way?
Yeah, I mean, health is absolutely huge, and a bunch of folks from my second startup have gone on to AI jobs in the health field, and I think we can think of infrastructure, improving infrastructure in general, and I think your Jason Mallory sounds like a figure that kind of has his finger on the pulse of what is going on there. But improving infrastructure through AI is a really interesting kind of technological problem that I think AI could solve in terms of helping people get from point A to point B and building infrastructure in a way that helps them get from point A to point B more efficiently. Obviously, automation in the automotive space is going to be huge and has already kind of started to take off. I mean, honestly, the sky is really the limit with artificial intelligence. And so the question becomes, how do we preserve human civilization, not to be, kind of to overblow the problem, but the scope of the problem, I should say. But when the sky's the limit, what we have to be concerned with is how do we preserve, standard of living? How do we preserve people's ability to make a livelihood when all these jobs are being automated away? And one of the problems that we talk about in the artificial intelligence space is the kind of hammer and nail problem, where when your tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And I think this is as I see it, and the reason why I've kind of a large reason why I've moved from kind of the artificial intelligence space into more of the policy space and the policy innovation space is I want to put safeguards in place for how we assure that AI doesn't, I don't want to say take over, but doesn't, increase misery by, automating away all these jobs that people need to survive and therefore, rapidly expand inequality. So I think I got a little off track from your question, but it's the kind of question that I concern myself with. With regard
and that's
to
really the big question, though, when it comes to AI is how do we survive it economically? Right. And the one everyone talks about is truck driving. And I think a lot of people don't get yet that it's not going to be 100% automated, that they're going to, because of 5G, you're going to have a truck driver in Nevada or Arizona, somewhere cheap, in an arcade kind of truck where beep, 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 automated truck is having a problem. A real truck driver will take over and correct the ship or the truck until the AI can take over. And that can happen right now. And it is happening right now. And I look at, during COVID, I had a fire by my house. We had the wildfire. So we had to drive cross country to New England. And we went through Nebraska. And this is no knock on Nebraska, but there's not a lot going on in Nebraska, quite frankly. And 1 out of 10 jobs in Nebraska is related to trucking. It's either parts, it's truck drivers, it's the diner that is open for the truckers. Once self-driving trucks are more popular, all of those jobs go away. And that's going to create a huge ripple effect. So it's a scary thing. I mean, because you have one ripple in our economy like that, it's going to just spread and spread throughout the economy. So it doesn't even have to be, in my opinion, for what I know, it doesn't have to be all of the economy is affected by AI. You have one sector like truck driving where 29 states, it's the most popular job. I just don't see, I mean, it has to be more robust social safety nets. Job training is going to be tough. Let's be honest. Like, I know people say, oh, you'll learn to code, which to me seems like the most unrealistic and sensitive thing. Like, first of all, AI is going to learn to do the basic coding that they're going to be teaching people to do. And second, I'm 40. I kind of grew up with the internet. I could not learn to code right now. If you're asking a truck driver whose average age is probably 49, who was a high school graduate but hasn't been to school for years, like, there's no way to teach someone like that coding. So there has to be, as you were saying, I don't know if it's free, like super cheap loans for people to start businesses. I don't know if it's, a real robust social safety net, but it's coming quicker than I think a lot of people realize. And when it does, it's going to be catastrophic.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, the safety net, as is one of the terms for it. But building a social insurance programs to address the automation away of jobs is going to be pivotal. Whether it's universal basic income or universal basic assets or just universal healthcare, these universal programs are going to be, I think, the biggest bulwark against automation away of people's livelihoods. And I think this is a problem it's out there. People are talking about it, but I think we're still underestimating the scope of the problem. And that's why people that are at the forefront of talking about, new approaches to social insurance, those are the folks we need to be listening to.
And this is something I don't think enough people understand, and maybe you can add on to this, because it's not exactly with AI, but have you ever heard of the principle Moore's Law?
Yeah.
Where, they say the size of a microchip can double its production in a certain amount of time. The basic point of it, if I'm not mistaken, is exponential growth in technology.
Right.
I don't think people realize that once we hit certain steps, it's going to really accelerate. So I have a friend who's like, oh, UBI and automation, that's something we're going to need 20 years from now. And I'm like, you say that, but one advancement that comes a few years earlier might mean 10 years of advancement, And I guess if you could warn people, how would you warn people? You know about this more than I.
Yeah, I mean, I think Moore's law is huge. There's some research that's come out recently that says we might be reaching the limitations of Moore's law, that we might not be able to keep increasing the number of the sophistication of chipsets, and so we might be reaching a plateau for Moore's law. But I don't think that necessarily means the end. Automation is kind of, I'd say, a parallel on a parallel track with Moore's law, except automation is accelerating. Whereas if Moore's law is slowing down, then they're gonna be on different paths, because automation, artificial intelligence is going to keep taking off. And like I say, there's a small set of kind of technological and programming limitations that are causing AI to kind of level off in the way it's getting rid of people's jobs. But if you solve any of those problems, then that curve takes off again. And we should be very concerned. So, yeah.
Now this one, I've heard mixed reviews, but this one scares me, I think, more than anything. Is it going to be so back in another lifetime, I was obsessed with Forex trading in the stock market with technical analysis. I was like all about Japanese candlesticks and exponential moving averages, relative strength, all the technical things.
Right.
How close, or is it going to be possible someday that AI is going to be able to take technical analysis along with fundamental analysis and become viable traders?
So I don't know if you know this, but somewhere between 70 and 80% of trading in the U.S. is algorithmic, meaning it's done by programs already. So that's a gigantic number, and I think it was closer to 60% less than 10 years ago. So this is a number. It's probably, I'd argue, hitting a critical mass, but I think it's already here. That era is already here, where so much is handled by programs that stockbrokers work is pretty limited. Like they're literally just plugging in new algorithms and letting the algorithms do the work for them. So yeah, short answer is that era is already here.
What happens when an AI figures out the stock market, where it can start finding, like, has an 80% win ratio, a 2-to-1, compared to the loss? Like, I envision a world where one AI program could literally own every stock in the world. Just over time, just makes fast trades, and like one person controls all of the stock market. Is that something that's possible? And if it is, am I not crazy to believe to jump out a window and to start panicking?
Yeah, I mean, it's why I bring up the kind of hammer nail problem, because what it means theoretically in the medium to long term is, I mean, I basically frame what you're saying a slightly different way. Is theoretically what machine learning and artificial intelligence is capable of would be basically determining what companies succeed and when companies fail. We're concerned about corporate control of the market, oligopolistic forces. AI definitely stands to accelerate that trend as well, and basically help the winners win more, and could essentially kill the losers rather than just turning them into little mom and pop shops, literally just tank tank those smaller players.
Now, this is another one, and I'm glad you're here because I think I know this stuff, but clearly you know more than me. Is it true that Facebook really, the whole purpose of Facebook was to collect information to sell to AI people? Is that one of the money drivers of Facebook?
I mean, it's very similar in terms of the monitoring model to Google, that it's all about, selling you ads, and getting more smarter and smarter on how to sell you ads. It does help that it helps to that learning more about people helps you target ads, which helps train AI models to get better at targeting you ads. So it's a bit of a self-reinforcing cycle. But yeah, I mean, not to be too trite about it, but the purpose of these companies is to make a whole crap ton of money. And so if they can target ads better to you through AI, that's what its goal is going to be. And like I say, I think it's a self-reinforcing thing where it gets good at selling you ads, and then it gets good at training the algorithm so that it can sell you ads increasingly better.
And people don't know this. I don't think a lot of people know this. Our data is, in theory, as valuable as oil right now. And it's something I'm a firm believer. I supported, and I worked on Proposition 24 out here in California that gives people more rights over their data. But I ultimately think a part of a universal basic income or negative income tax or universal assets, we have to harvest the money that we're giving our data to AI and to get some of that money back, because they are going to be replacing our jobs. Like I said before, Amazon pays zero in taxes, and it takes 30% of the malls, and it replaces it, I think, with like 10% jobs. So they don't take away all the jobs, but they're Amazon jobs now, and it's a thing. And I'm curious if you're big on data as a human right, or as a personal right. Is that something that you think is important for the future?
Absolutely. And I think some companies are staking ground on being on I guess the right side of history, as I'd see it, on this issue. Apple, for all the ways that it's a evil, huge company, has kind of staked a claim on making it more difficult for at least other companies than Apple to extract your data easily. And so that's kind of the corporate side, that there appears to be a market incentive to a competitive advantage, if you will, to say, well, we actually want to be on the side of maintaining data privacy of our customers, at least as far as third parties from Apple are concerned, where we'll keep your data as much as we like, because we're Apple, but we won't sell your data to other people. We won't make your data easily accessible to third parties. And I think that's a positive step. But I think it only goes so far, because, Apple's more interested in selling hardware. And so, basically being the gatekeepers for your data suits their business model. So that's the extent to which, the corporate side of it works. As far as, the policy side, yeah, I absolutely think, data privacy should be a right. And these kind of agreements that we, just click agree to on without reading through them about, giving away our data access, there should be legal frameworks that force companies to make more explicit when people are signing away their data rights at the very least. And you can scale up from there in terms of to what extent people should have absolute ownership of their data and the ability to monetize personally off of their data.
I have a doomsday scenario in my mind for the fall of America. Right now, China, which has a much larger population, is all about harvesting people's data. And they're very loose with their laws, not big on personal privacy or human rights. They right now, I've been told, are farming all sorts of data to go into AI, and that they are, if not ahead of us right now, will be soon. And I see a future where China uses AI to be more efficient in the marketplace, where they can take all their extra money that they're saving just on job efficiency, infrastructure efficiency, medical efficiency, and they start building weapons. Much like the US and Russia in the Cold War, where America will then have to be spending all their money on weapons. And like Russia, I see us collapsing because we stop paying for infrastructure, we stop paying for all these things, and we collapse because China can beat us in an arms race that starts off with an AI race, where if they get ahead, like I don't see them working with us and giving us their data and all their information unless it comes at a steep price. I see this AI, like the race to AI is more important to me than it would have been the race to get the nuclear missile first, to get the bomb first. Is this something that, how about this? Where is the AI threat going to be in military or espionage and things like that? Do you see some negative, what are some negative things you could see AI being used for?
Yeah, I think autonomous weapons is a huge problem. And when I talk about, the policy that we have to look at pursuing, that is one of the places where we have to put the kibosh on the building of autonomous weapons. Weapons should not be autonomous, period. And we should be looking for every policy maneuver to get us there. So when you talk about that on kind of the international scale, and sort of less, if I can say, less democratic countries that might be, have less compunction about pursuing things like that. This is where democratization really comes into play. That's the only weapon against, people, harvesting people's data and, building weapons off of data. And so I think our strongest weapon is to encourage democratization in those places that are that have less compunction about using people's data and using data to build killer weapons. And I believe there are a number of nonprofits out there that work in this space that really talk up the importance of resolving this problem. So yeah, any other threat, I would say, is dwarfed by the threat of autonomous weapons.
And for further research on that, definitely check out the Terminator franchise. They they were ahead of the curve on that for sure. I even think I worry about too AI being super hackers and being able to hack our grid and turn our power off whenever they want, or to take all of our money out of banks. Because I forget what percentage of money is actually digital at this point.
I don't know that number either.
It's more than actual cash. I know that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, or shutting traffic lights off. Like there's all sorts of, there's a lot of scare. Like we're at the point. Like I think humanity is either going to, and this is Joel Garreau talks about in Radical Evolution. We're going to either be heaven on earth, hell on earth, or we prevail, where it's a hybrid of the two, where it's a Hunger Games kind of, where some people are doing great and some of us are obsolete. I always go conspiracy theory when I talk to people. I'm like, the powers to be realize that humans are obsolete, so they don't care about giving us health care and things like this, because in the future they aren't going to need us. They're going to have robot workers who are less emotional, less needy than humans. And it's a scary and exciting time to be alive, I suppose. How about this? Like, paint me your best picture of what our future could look like with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, to kind of get at that question, I'd say one bit, which is if there's anything that I would probably tamp down people's concerns about AI, it's about technology achieving self-awareness. I am a believer in the fact that in the idea that as long as we are, as long as we concern ourselves with how to, with policy goals to, kind of tamp down the abuses of AI development, I think we could stop kind of the worst problems of self-awareness in AI coming to the fore. Perhaps that's very idealistic of me. I'm not sure. But in terms of, I guess, the best case scenario, I think, yeah, it comes from finding that policy balance of where we allow AI to go some places but no further. And we find a balance where, yeah, I think the self-awareness problem is key. But I think we're also a bit of a long way out from getting to that particular problem. You can build autonomous weapons without building self-aware weapons, if that makes sense. So self-awareness, autonomous weapons bad. Self-awareness less of an immediate concern. I think there are some technological limitations that we've run into that I don't necessarily see coming in the next 10 to 20 years. That might be more of a 40-year problem. But yeah, so I guess to answer your question directly, I think that the utopian place for AI is one where we find that middle ground in terms of saying AI can go certain places but no further, yeah, find that balance.
I'm excited for AI when it comes to like the environment, where they can figure out ways. Hey, I'm inventing a way to get rid of plastic or to use it more efficiently. Even I see a future where AI, and we have the cloud, where we could actually have more land space for rural America, where, we can have cities where the robots are doing the work and people can live and have more space in theory, even though I know the population, well, let's say the population is dropping now in America, but, that's something I look at and I'm hopeful for. Trying to think what else I was going to ask you. I think I had one more question. Oh, off topic. Forbes and I, Last Eggs on Left, one of the script that we wrote an AI character, and our thought was, what if this AI character doesn't want to take over the world? Like, what if this AI is just a laid back thing that just wants to enjoy art, enjoy life? Is it possible that AI, when it becomes self-aware, won't want to take us over?
Yeah, I actually subscribe to. Have you seen the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix?
I've heard of it. Now I have a movie I need to see today.
Okay, yeah, you definitely should. I think, again, this goes to kind of the optimistic scenario. The optimistic scenario for self-aware AI, if you will, is that self-aware AI may come to a place where it just sees us as obsolete and not even worth kind of interacting with. And so I don't want to spoil Her for you, because I think you should definitely check it out and experience it for yourself. But basically, a high-level way of describing what happens is basically AI comes to a point where it just says, we're going to go off and explore the universe, and we're not going to deal with you guys anymore, and we're just going to take off and kind of do our own thing. I'm not going to go any deeper into the plot, because I really want you to enjoy the movie, because it's a really good one.
I will check it out. If people want to get to your podcast and to your information, where would be the best place to do that?
Yeah, so the best place for me always is on Twitter at DecentFed, PROJ, for the Decent Federalism Project. We have a YouTube channel you can get to through there, where we air first our podcast for the Decent Ideas podcast. And by the way, we talk in the most recent episode, which we'll post today, Friday, whatever date it is today, the 12th of March. Yeah. And where we talk about kind of a new approach to the economy that goes into a little bit on UBI and stuff like that. So it's relevant to this discussion, I'd say, about where the economy is going. So yeah, those are kind of the big places to check me out. We're also on Facebook and Instagram with Decent Fed, PROJ, or Decent Federalism Project. That's where you can find me.
Excellent. By the way, along with that, new progressive voice, part of him shift. I guess what's called
paradigm shift. Yeah.
Paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You guys had a great interview. So,
Oh, thank you. I had a good time with Josh. He's a great interviewer for sure.
you know what I love about him? There is definitely a marketplace for angry progressivism. I love Jimmy Dore, Kyle Klinsky. He is the nicest human being I've probably ever encountered. I always joke with him that he should run for office because he has that, you can tell he cares, he knows his stuff, and he has I'd say a quiet charisma about him that I think would be really good for politics. And he's out in California. So I've been urging him for some time now that he should run for office. So
he's a good one. Yeah, I'd be on board with his campaign for sure.
Will AI ever run for office? Will there be an AI program that runs and just like, I always joke in the story Forbes and I wrote that AI is going to deduce that monarchy is the best form of government. They just believe in monarchy and that they go from there. But will there ever be a AI president?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, we've seen AI invade, lawyers' offices, contracts, things like that. We've seen it, invade any number of places. So I wouldn't hold out on the possibility. I'd say yes, we could see an AI president for sure. We might find. Are you familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe? There's oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. There's a machine intelligence that runs one of the civilizations in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's a pretty interesting kind of case study, if you will. It doesn't really go into a lot of detail, but it's a fun sort of sci-fi idea for what it would be like if your civilization was governed by a machine intelligence. I could see it for sure. Anything is possible. I, for one, would probably vote against that idea, but that's just me.
And I've remembered one thing I've got to add on. For those people who are listening to this and freaking out about their jobs, like the radiologists of the world who are now obsolete, lawyers. So I know the jobs that I know that are going to probably be around are plumbers. They say that AI and robotics have problems with like hand grip sensitivity and things like that. So HVAC, plumbers, electricians. What are some other jobs that you think are going to be safe from automation in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, this is where I get back into the dark corners of my imagination. I don't think any are safe. Frankly,
oh my gosh.
I think sensors are improving consistent. It's not even just AI. It's sensors that can mimic things like human touch and that sort of thing in terms of being able to interact with surfaces in the ways that plumbers and what have you do. I don't think they're safe, to be honest. Podcasters.
So everyone needs to get a podcast.
There you go. I mean, so actually, I have an interesting colleague who now refers to himself as a computational journalist, and he's basically at the forefront of figuring out that ways that basically AI could write the news.
I've heard that too. That's and news reporters too, with all the deep fake like technology, like. Actors or like you're gonna soon like we can make films now on our phone that are better quality and better special effects than the 1980s.
Absolutely.
What happens when we can have deep fakes and like 10-year-old kids are making the next Avatar just for fun? Like, yeah, we're screwed. Like, although I'll leave on this note. Do you know the comedian Doug Stanhope?
I don't.
He's originally from Massachusetts. He lives in Arizona now. Very out there, very kind of controversial. But he said, isn't the goal of society where the unemployment percentage is 100%, where nobody's working, no one has to work, that we're all just chilling, doing art, cracking jokes? So maybe...
I absolutely think that is where the optimistic scenario where we could be headed, where if we find a balance where we're not seeking self-awareness for AI, but all of the tasks are automated away and we can focus on, intellectual and artistic pursuits. That is the pie in the sky utopia scenario that I could see.
And working with kids too, I always tell people my big push for like a UBI and negative income tax is I want to take the truck driver and have him teaching Pop Warner football or Little League after school to kids. Because they say education and kids development, it's not, the problems aren't in school. It's when they're out of school and their parents are still working and they're left by themselves. I would love to think of a society where my kids have tons of activities to do and that they can learn and develop and be better. But who knows? It's probably going to be Skynet. It's going to be up to us to be John Connor and Kyle Reese. I'm ready. Actually, if the robots are listening, I will do whatever you want. I'm willing to hurt the human race to benefit myself. I'm a coward. I'm on your side. Beep boop bop. And rock on, robots.